Here on a final hearing. Ms. Wiggins is with us for the department. Mr. Ingram's with us representing the child. Mr. Taylor's with us representing the father, Mr. Tolbert. Mr. Taylor, I've got the Potter County Video Arraignment Room. I assume that may be your client.
Correct, Your Honor.
Okay, let me get him in. And then we have Mr. Carey representing the potential intervener, Georgia Ruiz, they are both with us. Let's be sure this is Mr. Tolbert. This is Judge Graham. There we go. Is Mr. Tolbert in there? Okay. All right. Mr. Tolbert is with us. Okay. And I have just received an affidavit of voluntary relinquishment reportedly signed by Mr. Tolbert. And I don't have the page where it shows it was filed, but I understand it was filed.
That's correct, Your Honor. It was signed by the caseworker and then filed.
Okay. All right. So now let me inquire, where do we stand on the motion for leave to intervene?
Judge, I'll just address briefly. My intervention was an attempt to intervene under both sections or either. Under both 102.004A1, and then under the permissive section under B also.
Okay, well, I noticed, let me get to, let me get to the part of it. Your paragraph says that she's files this action both as an original suit and as an intervention. I don't believe she can file an original suit, so we're here just on your intervention.
That's correct. We were not.
Ms. Wiggins, you filed your motion to strike. Are you still wanting to proceed with that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, then. I've got, let me get the right people in here first. I've got Michelle Spencer, Shay Grant, Brian Bacon, Alexis Venezuela, Joshua Woodruff, and Michael Whitfield.
Okay, Judge. So I understand that Mr. Carey will need to present evidence for his petition and leave to intervene. But I have one witness that is related to the grandparents that needs to be gone for 1:30. He works for Homeland Security, and so he has to be out by 1:30. So can I take him out of order?
Sure.
Okay.
Who is that?
That is Brian Bacon.
Okay.
He's
Let's get Mr. Bacon in.
Thank you, Judge.
May Mr. Tolbert be told he can sit down, please?
Sure. Yeah, Mr. Tolbert, if you've got a seat, you're welcome to have a seat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Bacon, this is Judge Graham. Can you hear me?
I can, sir. I apologize. I can't seem to figure out why the video's not working.
That's okay. We'll. I know you've got to get to work, so we'll go without your video. If you would, please raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir, I do.
Thank you. Ms. Wiggins, you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Officer Bacon, how are you currently employed?
With the Amarillo Police Department.
And what is your current assignment?
I'm currently assigned to Homeland Security Investigations as a federal task force officer on behalf of the Amarillo Police Department.
And how long have you worked for the Amarillo Police Department?
In total, a little over 17 and a half years.
And were you working as a APD officer on August 4th of 2013?
Yes, ma'am.
And on what capacity were you working that day?
I was assigned to the Midnight's Patrol as a uniformed patrol officer.
And on August 4th on 2013 at 22:36 hours, which is 10:36 p.m.?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Were you dispatched to a location?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
And what was the dispatch call about?
Officers were dispatched to 21 a disorderly fight involving a male subject who was armed with knives, fighting with an adult female.
And were you able to identify, or were you told who the identity of the caller was?
The caller was a child, I believe. Don't recall off the top of my head what. I believe her name was Monica, the child at that time.
Okay. And when you arrived at that location, what did you observe?
We had parked down the street near the corner of Country Lane and Osage, and observed several individuals standing at about 2100 Country Lane with a male subject matching the clothing description, screaming and yelling from the street towards where some other people were standing.
And at that time, did you attempt to engage in conversation with the male that was yelling?
Eventually we did, after he was seen running in the house and came back out verbally confrontational with the adult female that was standing on the sidewalk. Me and other officers confronted him at that point, realizing he was the suspect listed in the calls for service.
And at that point in time, did you know whether or not he had a weapon on his person?
We did not at that time, but we had believed he was still armed, potentially with knives.
And when you engage with a subject who is potentially armed, what is the most important thing for officers to be aware of?
First and foremost would be the safety of the other people involved. We knew that we had other individuals that were engaged in the verbal confrontation with the suspect at that time. So we wanted to mitigate any risks that could be posed to them if he is armed and was going to cause harm to them. And then secondly would be officers to be able to detain that person without any risk to officers getting hurt, whether it be stabbed or any myriad of issues that could arise.
And at that point in time, were you able to get, when you decided to engage with the individual suspect, were you able to visually see all of his person?
No, ma'am. He was hiding behind a wooden privacy fence, like a smaller fence, purposely trying to avoid showing his hands to officers, completely disregarding verbal commands that were given to him to show us his hands and to surrender so that we could approach him safely.
And at that point in time, what was the decision made in regards to the interaction with that individual?
As I had come around the fence where he was kind of ducking behind, realizing that I could close the distance with him, not seeing him readily with the knife in his hands, the decision was made for me to push him down to the ground so that we could gain control over him, kind of overpowering any physical confrontation that he'd have with us so that we could safely get him in handcuffs to be able to control his movements or ability to access a weapon.
And at that point in time, did y'all, I guess, take him down and place him in handcuffs?
Yes, ma'am.
And was he later identified to you?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was his name?
Joe Fuentes.
And at any point in time after the altercation, did you identify who the other individual was regarding the altercation?
Yes, identified as the girlfriend to Joe at that time. Her name was Georgia Ruiz, who was the victim of the aggravated assault with a deadly weapon offense that was being investigated.
And did you speak with Miss Ruiz?
Yes, ma'am.
And did she indicate if there was a weapon involved?
Yes, ma'am, she did.
And what weapon did she indicate?
Judge, I want to interpose an objection to hearsay.
Overruled. She's a potential witness. I mean, she's a potential party, not yet, but overruled.
You can answer, Mr. Bacon.
Thank you. She had identified a knife that was found in the kitchen floor that was said or was told to me was used to threaten her with attempting to stab her.
And did you also have an occasion to investigate whether or not anyone was intoxicated at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
And were any conclusions regarding that determined?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was the determination regarding and whether alcohol was involved?
Joe Fuentes, the suspect in this case, had admitted to consuming a 6-pack of beer.
Judge, again, I'm going to have an objection to hearsay.
Sustained as to what Mr. Fuentes said.
Now, did you have any interactions with Mr. Fuentes?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Were you able to notice any signs on his person visually or with any of his statements or any of his physical indicators of intoxication?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you observe?
He had a strong odor of alcohol emitting from his breath when he spoke. A lot of this was, when I first observed it, was during the physical altercation of him resisting while we were trying to place him in handcuffs.
And was there also, you indicated, a child at the scene?
Yes, ma'am, there was.
And was that a child identified in the APD report?
I believe she was. Yes, ma'am.
And did you have her name and date of birth?
Monica. 2001.
So she would have been 11 at the time. Is that correct? Oh, well, 12.
12. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And was she present at the scene when officers were on scene?
Yes, ma'am, she was.
I'll pass the witness, Judge.
Okay. Mr. Taylor?
No question, Johnny.
Mr. Carey?
Judge, I don't have any questions.
Mr. Ingram?
No questions.
All right, then if we were through with Officer Bacon, can he be excused?
No objection.
No objection.
All right, Officer Bacon, I'm going to release you so you can go about your day's business. Thank you for your testimony and thank you for your service.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Judge.
Uh-huh. All right, Ms. Wiggins, did you have anybody else you had to get in right now?
Hey. Well, I do have 2 officers that are in training. They're not as time sensitive, but I didn't know if you wanted us to do that.
No, that's fine. We can get that in. I don't think it's going to hurt.
Okay.
It has to do with the intervention and the motion to strike. So who do you want next?
There should be a phone number 1850. That is Officer Michael Wheeler. And how are you currently employed?
As a City of Amarillo Patrol Police Officer.
And how long have you worked for the City of Amarillo?
12 years.
And are you a certified police officer?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you working in that capacity with APD on February 3rd of 2013?
I was.
And at approximately 21:04 on that day, were you dispatched to a location?
Yes, I was.
And why were you dispatched to that location?
We were sent on a family fight in progress.
And when you arrived, what did you observe?
We were met at the front door by a Hispanic male on the front porch. He was not wearing a shirt, and he was his face and arms were covered in blood.
Okay, did you identify him?
Yes, he was identified as Joe Fuentes.
And after you detained Mr. Fuentes to investigate, did you notice anything about his demeanor or state of mind?
He was highly intoxicated.
And what indicators did you see to denote or form to the conclusion that he was intoxicated?
Yeah, he was. Well, as we were escorted to our car, he could barely walk on his own. He smelled strongly of alcohol. He had to be assisted to our patrol car by walking.
And after you placed him in the patrol vehicle, did you then have an interaction with another individual at the home?
Yes, I spoke to, I believe it was his live-in girlfriend at the time.
And did you identify her?
I did. Her name, or she was identified as Georgia Ruiz.
And did she indicate what was going on that night?
Yes, she stated they had been in a verbal altercation at first over the Super Bowl that night.
If I can interpose an objection to hearsay, get a ruling before the testimony.
Okay, overrule.
And sorry, you indicated that she had originally been in a verbal altercation about the Super Bowl. Is that what you said? I'm sorry.
Yes. Yeah, they were watching TV, and Mr. Fuentes became upset, I believe, at his team losing during the game, and at one point it had turned physical.
Okay. Did she describe how it had turned physical?
Yes, she stated that she had been pushed. He began pushing her, and then I believe he attempted to swing at her, trying to punch her, but he missed. But she described Mr. Fuentes as pushing her.
Okay. And was another individual in that home that night?
There was, I believe, Miss Ruiz's daughter.
Okay. And what was her name?
First name Monica, last name.
Okay. And was she 11 years old?
I believe at the time of the report, yes.
And were you able to know any details about her appearance or demeanor?
I don't recall her demeanor. She just kind of verified the story that Miss Ruiz gave.
I want to object to hearsay.
Overrule.
What I said. Could I have a basis of the overruling?
No, sir.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Let's proceed.
And was it your understanding whether or not all three parties were at the home during this altercation?
Yes.
I'll pass the witness, Judge.
All right,
And to
thank you,
that-
Mr. Taylor.
No, no question, John.
Mr. Carey.
Judge, could I have a ruling that last statement was hearsay, and I wanted to object to that also.
Okay, overrule.
Okay, thanks. I don't have any questions.
All right, Mr. Ingram.
No questions.
All right, if no one has anything further from Officer Wheeler, can he be excused?
No objection.
No objection.
Okay. All right, Officer Wheeler, I'll release this so you can go back to your day's business. Thank you for your testimony and thank you for your service. Okay, Miss Wiggins.
Thank you, Judge. Is there an Officer Woodruff?
Yes, Miss Wiggins, you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Officer Woodruff, how are you currently employed?
I'm employed with the Amarillo Police Department, ma'am.
And how long have you worked for the Amarillo Police Department?
A little over 15 years, ma'am.
And are you a certified police officer?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you working for the Amarillo Police Department on November 4th of 2018?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
And at approximately, let's see, Amarillo Boulevard, did you initiate a traffic stop?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And what did you observe that indicated a law was being broken?
I had pulled up to the traffic light and was next to a 2001 blue Ford Explorer. I ran the license plate on my in-car computer, and my driver or the license plate return said the plate was expired, ma'am.
And did you initiate a traffic stop?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And did the individual comply with that traffic stop?
Yes, ma'am, he did.
And did you identify the driver of the vehicle?
Yes, ma'am. I identified him as Joe Frank Fuentes.
Okay. And did you, when you approached the vehicle, did you explain the reason for the stop?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And did you look at the registration sticker on the vehicle when you were talking to the individual?
Yes, ma'am. After I explained to him why I stopped him, I checked the registration sticker and observed that it actually belonged to a different vehicle than the one that Mr. Fuentes was driving, ma'am.
And so driving without a valid registration, is that an offense?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
And is having a registration sticker that does not belong to the vehicle that is on, is that an offense?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
And at that point in time, did you run him through dispatch for any active warrants?
Yes, ma'am, I did. He had informed me that he believed
Okay,
he might have to-
without what he said. Sorry, you can't talk about what he said. Just did you run him through dispatch?
Yes, ma'am.
And at that point in time, did dispatch come with anything that was relevant to your stop?
Yes, ma'am. They advised me that he did have several capious profile warrants and his driver's license was not valid.
And at that point in time, what did you do?
I placed him under arrest for his 5 capious profile warrants and issued him traffic citations for the on-view offenses.
I'll pass the witness, Judge.
Mr. Taylor.
No question, John.
Mr. Carey.
KPS profile warrants, are those for unpaid fines?
Those are when, was I supposed to answer that?
Yes,
I
you
believe
can.
Okay. KPS profile warrants, to my understanding, are when someone has entered a payment arrangement with the court, and they have defaulted on said payment arrangement, sir.
So they have unpaid fines they haven't paid, basically.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Pass witness.
Okay, Mr. Ingram.
No questions.
All right, if no one else has further questions, can Officer Woodruff be excused?
No objection, Judge.
No objection.
No objection.
Okay, Officer Woodruff, I'll go ahead and release you so you can go about your day's business. Thank you for your testimony and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Your Honor. You have a good day.
I'm muted.
too.
Thank you. I would call Michael Whitfield, Officer Whitfield. Thank you, Judge. Officer Whitfield, how are you currently employed?
I'm employed with the city of Amarillo, the police department.
And how long have you worked for APD?
About 4.5 years now.
And were you working as a certified police officer on March 5th of 2020?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you assigned a 2-man unit that was patrolling that day?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you initiate a traffic stop around intersection 10th and Georgia?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was the reason for the traffic stop?
I passed a vehicle that didn't have its registration sticker properly displayed, and it caught my attention. So I flipped around and stopped it.
Okay. And when did the vehicle comply with your request to stop?
It did. Well, it whipped into a parking lot, which usually cars would do that, chat if they're up to something. So I made the block and saw the occupants switching seats. And then so we pulled up on it and initiated a traffic stop on it.
Okay, and you initiated or you stated a comment that they whipped in very quickly. Is your conclusion that they were up to something based on your training and experience as being an officer?
Yes, ma'am. Cars will usually do that if they think we're telling them.
Okay, and you indicated that the individuals in the car changed places. Can you describe that a little bit more?
Yes, ma'am. When we were pulling up to the car, there's a male driver and female passenger. They were outside the car switching places. So the male was getting to the passenger seat, and the female was getting to the driver's seat. And that's right as we pulled up and we initiated the stop and began talking to them.
Okay, did you identify the individual who is now in the driver's seat?
Yes, ma'am. It was Georgia Ruiz.
And did you identify the individual who's now in the passenger seat?
Yes, ma'am. Joe Fuentes.
Okay, and when you approached the vehicle, what did you notice about it registration-wise? Because you indicated you pulled it over for not seeing the registration. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. So the sticker wasn't stuck to the window. It was held up with like a glove tucked underneath it. And then they had altered it. So it was an expired tag and they had covered it with 20 to make it look like it was up to date.
Okay, and did Ms. Ruiz give any explanation for that?
No, ma'am. Throughout the entire stop, they had no knowledge of it. And that's just, they kept saying that's just how they got the car. They wouldn't tell me who they got it from, just being shady about it.
Okay, and did you also have an issue or something was not right with the driver's or the license plate?
Yes, ma'am. The license plate went to a different vehicle as well. And
Now,
the sticker went to a different vehicle and the plate was to a different vehicle.
okay, so the sticker that had been altered was for a different vehicle, and then the license plate was for a different vehicle as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Were they for the same different vehicle?
Yeah, yes. Excuse me. Yeah, so they sorry, I'm looking at my report real fast. Yeah, so the license plate on the sticker came back to a pickup, and then the plate was different too. So yes, the
Okay.
sticker and the plate were different. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and at that point in time, what did you do at the end of your investigation?
I seized the sticker and the plates, because at that time, when we were doing any kind of report based on our PAB2, so our auto theft unit, we're supposed to make a report on any kind of fictitious tags or fictitious plates. So I seized the sticker and the plates and made the report, and then I gave Fuentes several tickets. So no insurance, no driver's license, having a wrong plate on the vehicle, and then having an expired plate on the vehicle.
I'll pass the witness, Judge.
Mr. Taylor,
No question, Your Honor.
Mr. Carey.
The result of that just Class C tickets to Mr. Fuentes, correct?
Can you repeat that, sir? Sorry.
The result of that stop was Class C tickets to Mr. Fuentes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's the witness.
Mr. Ingram.
No questions.
All right, if there's nothing else, can Officer Whitfield be excused?
No objection, Judge.
All right, Officer Whitfield, I'll remove you so you can go about your day's business. Thank you for your testimony and thank you for your service.
Thank you, guys. You have a good one.
You too.
That was all the officers I had, Judge. Thank you for letting me take them out of order.
Sure. Okay, so now we're back to the amended petition for leave to intervene. And Ms. Wiggins, you stated you're still intending to exercise your motion to strike.
That's correct, Judge. I believe that Mr. Carey has the burden to show about the past contact with the child, and so I would ask that he present evidence on that.
Right. All right. So, Mr. Carey, because of the motion to strike, then the burden comes to you to, and as she said, the way I read your petition and the motion to strike, I'll hear testimony on the substantial past contact your client has had with this child.
All right, Judge. I'd call first witness Georgia Ruiz. Georgia, how old woman are you?
I am 56,
Where do you reside?
31.
I'm sorry, ma'am. I hope I interrupted you. You may not want to say that. We're broadcast live over YouTube. You probably don't want anybody to have your address.
Do you reside in Amarillo, Texas?
Yes, I do.
And Do you understand why we are here today?
Yes, I do.
We're going to talk about past contacts you've had with your grandchild.
Yes, sir.
What's the name of your grandchild?
Elena.
And do you know what day she was born?
Yes, 2022.
And when she was born, were you at the hospital?
Yes, I was.
And when she came home from the hospital, did she come home to your house?
Yes, she did.
And did she reside with you?
Yes, she did.
And can you, during that time when she resided with you, how long did she reside at your house?
About a year.
During that time, did you work?
No.
Did you stay home with her?
I stayed home with her. Well, her mother, after her mother had her, my daughter, she went back to work after 4 weeks, and I stayed home with baby and took care of her.
And did you do that for the entire year period?
Yes, sir.
And up until the time, you did that up until the time the mother passed away?
Yes, sir.
Now, would you be the one that would get up with the child in the morning?
Yes, sir.
Would you feed her?
Yes, sir.
Would you be sure that she had a bath?
Yes, sir.
You wanted to be sure she had clothes?
Yes, sir.
Not only clothes for the day, but were you the person who purchased clothes for her?
Yes, sir.
The meals that she ate, who bought the food for the meals that she ate?
I would.
What would you do on an average day with her for that year period of time?
Well, we'd get up in the morning. I'd feed her breakfast. I'd take her a bath. We'd watch some cartoons. We'd go out to the park. We'd go to the mall. Just go out to Discovery Center. Just have a good time with her.
Was there anyone else that cared for her during that year period?
No, sir.
Now, at night when the mother would come home, did she spend time with her too?
Yes, she did.
Would you go many nights be home also?
Yes.
Did the child develop a close relationship with you?
Yes, she did.
Did she recognize who you were?
Yes, she did.
Was she bonded to you?
Yes, she did.
Now, after the year period when her mother passed away, did you see the child anymore after that?
Yes, I did.
And how did you see the child after that?
I seen her weekly at St. Francis once a week for 1 hour, and she knows who I am. She runs to me.
Let me ask you a question. And that went on for about how many months?
Probably for about 9 months.
Okay. And so did you miss appointments for that?
No, sir.
Tell me, when you would go to those appointments, how would they happen? Would you go to a room and she would be brought to you, or how would they?
Well, most of the time, either we were there first or she was there. If she was there first, when we'd walk in, she'd run right up to me and say "Nana" and want me to grab her and hold her.
So she recognized who you were?
Yes, she did.
Was she happy to see you?
Yes, very happy.
Did she seek physical contact from you?
Yes, she did.
Once you had greeted her in that meeting at that fashion, what would you do next?
Well, we would always buy her something to eat, buy her diapers, buy her wipes, buy her clothes, buy her snacks, buy her fruit. We would feed her, give her snacks, and then we would get down and play with toys, and I'd read her books.
So you'd always, every meeting, you would try to bring food for her?
Yes, sir.
Now, what type of play would you engage with her? She was about how old?
Oh, she was probably about a year old when we first started seeing her.
So how would you play with her?
Well, there's a bunch of toys there. We'd play with Barbie dolls, I'd read her books.
Okay.
I would play with blocks.
Anything if she was interested in some of the toys they had available,
yes.
You'd play with her. Did you ever bring toys from yourself?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Was her appearance that she was happy to see you and happy for you to be there?
Yes, sir.
When it came a time for her to leave, how was her demeanor? How did she act when she had to leave from you?
Well, I would put her at the car seat in Stephanie's car seat, and she would cry for me. She would say, "No, Nana, no."
Now, who's Stephanie?
Stephanie is a lady that supervises our visits.
Okay. And so you would help her put the child in the car seats, and the child would be upset.
Yes, sir.
Now, when did your visits go from weekly to once a month?
3 months ago.
Have you kept all of those visits?
Yes, sir.
Have those visits been different than the previous visits you described to us?
No, she's still the same way.
Still recognizes you?
Yes, sir.
Still runs to you?
Yes, sir.
Happy to see you when you come?
Yes, sir.
Sad to see you when you go?
Yes, sir.
Are you aware of anyone else who's visited with a child over
No.
that period of time?
No, sir, just me.
Let me interrupt, Miss Reeves. You're going to have to let him finish his question before you start answering. The court reporter can't take you both down at the same time.
Okay.
Thank you, Judge. Are you aware of anyone else who's had visits with her like that?
No, sir.
Now, are you aware of anyone else back before the mother's death who kept her, who kept the child overnight or visited with the child?
No, sir.
Are you asking the judge to consider this life, basically, that you've spent with this child her whole life, as significant to that child and demonstration that you've had past contacts?
Yes, sir.
Judge, I'll pass the witness.
All right. Thank you, Miss Wiggins.
Now, when your daughter passed away on January 9th of 2023, she was not in your residence. Is that correct?
No, not that night she wasn't.
And neither was the child. Is that right?
That's right.
I'll pass the witness, Judge.
All right. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Reeves, I was having kind of the same difficulty. You testified that you had Elena in your home for approximately the first year, but on January the 9th of 2023, when your daughter died, she was with, the child was with your daughter and Philip in a different residence, not in your home. Is that correct?
Yes, they were in Philip's residence that night. They had went to spend the night with him.
And that was January the 9th, well short of an entire year, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'll pass the witness.
Okay. Mr. Ingram.
No questions.
Okay. Anyone else have further questions for Ms. Ruiz?
Judge, let me just ask a couple other questions.
Okay.
When was the child born?
January 29, 2022.
And the mother passed away
January 9th
of
2022.
Of 23?
23, excuse me.
All right. So it is true then that the child was about a year old at the time of the death.
Yes, sir.
And she had spent most of her life with you.
Yes, sir.
All right, I'll pass this.
Anyone else have further questions?
Just one. Were you aware that your daughter was using drugs?
No, sir. No, ma'am, I didn't.
Okay. Was she living with you as well as is your testimony that she was living with you and the child?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'll pass the witness.
Anyone else? All right. So, Ms. Reeves, as I understand your testimony, then you said on the date that your daughter died, she and the child were visiting Mr. Tolbert at his residence?
Yes, sir.
So he was not living with you and mother and child?
No.
Okay. But to just be sure I understand, but your daughter and this child were living with you and just visiting the father?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Carey, if you have any other witnesses?
Judge, I don't know if she signed on or not. What's Stephanie's last name?
Stephanie Baskins.
And Judge, I would.
What?
I'm sorry. Is she going to testify just about contact? I apologize. Never mind.
I don't know. I don't have a Stephanie Vasquez. I have an Alexis Valenzuela and Michelle Spencer. That's my only two in the waiting room.
No, it's Stephanie Baskins.
She's not there.
I do have a subpoena for her, Judge. She may not have logged in successfully.
I think she's on. I think she's under your name, Mr. Carey. Stephanie, can you speak, please?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, all right. So give me just a second.
And Stephanie, are you familiar with Georgia Ruiz?
Yes, sir.
And how do you know her?
I supervise her visits with Elena.
And how long have you done that?
Since March of 23.
Okay. And did she attend early on weekly visits?
Yes.
Was she pretty regular? Did she miss many visits, or did she attend most all of them?
She's never missed a visit unless Elena was sick or something.
And then for the last 3 visits, have they been monthly?
Yes, the last 3 months they've been, well, since November, they've been monthly.
Okay. Are just as a general overall, how have the visits gone? Have they been good or bad?
They've been great. They're attentive to her needs. They bring fruit. They bring different snacks for her to eat. Georgia brings diapers and wipes every visit for her to take home back to placement. She plays with her according to her age level. They read books. If she needs cleaned up, they clean her up. They're good visits.
Let me interrupt just so I don't forget to ask later. You're saying, Ms. Baskin, you're saying they go well, they're attentive to her needs. Who's there besides Miss Ruiz?
Joe Fuentes.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Carey. Go ahead.
Now, how long have you been supervising, not just visits for Georgia Ruiz, but for anybody?
I have been with St. Francis for 2 years.
So is that the only job you have, is supervising visits?
Yes.
How, and this is an impossible question to answer, but I assume you have observed hundreds, if not thousands, of visits.
Many. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And through that experience, you have gained some expertise in how visits should be done and what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, correct?
Correct.
What happens if you see something that's inappropriate? Do you stop the visits?
I bring it to their attention and I stop it and let the parent support worker know, and also a supervisor know what went on.
Were you able to observe the connection between the child and Georgia?
Yes.
Is it a strong bond?
It is. I also grew a connection with Elena just from picking her up from daycare. She notices whenever I pick her up where we're going.
Yeah. Is she excited when that happens?
She is.
Whenever the visits have to end, how does Elena act?
She cries. She does. She gets in her car seat and she does cry.
Right. Are the visits, in your opinion, a positive thing in the life of Elena?
They are.
Can you tell the judge anything that Georgia Ruiz has done during any of those visits that was inappropriate?
None.
I'll pass the witness, Judge.
Okay, Ms. Wiggins?
Do you know Miss Ruiz outside of the visitation?
I don't.
So your only interactions with her and only knowledge of her have come just from those visitations?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know anything about her past or her past relationship with Mr. Fuentes?
Just from the few encounters that they've told me about during the visits.
Okay, and so that was just self-report by Miss Ruiz?
Correct.
I'll pass the witness, Judge.
All right, Mr. Taylor?
Just a couple, Your Honor. Did they tell you anything that was inconsistent with what you heard today during testimony earlier?
No, sir.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. Ingram?
No questions.
All right, does anybody have follow-ups?
No follow-up, Judge.
Okay. All right, can Ms. Baskin be excused?
No objection.
No objection.
Okay. Ms. Baskin, I'll release you so you can go about your afternoon's business. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Carey, any other witnesses?
Judge, that's all the witnesses I have.
All right. Ms. Wiggins, did you have any responsive witnesses?
I did. I would call Philip Tolbert.
All right, you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Tolbert, are you the father of
Yes, ma'am.
And where was the child residing on January 9th of 2023?
On Duncan Drive with me and Monica.
And how long had the child been living with you and Monica at that location?
We had got the house 3 months prior to her being born, and she was residing there from the day that she was born.
So So just so I'm clear, since there was contradictory testimony, did Monica, you, and the child all reside in the Duncan location without Miss Ruiz there?
Yes, ma'am. Monica's name was on the lease, and Elena's address on her insurance and her birth certificate were also, and all her paperwork was also to that address as well.
Okay. And just for the record, that was 28.
Yes, ma'am.
And how much contact did Elena have with Georgia Ruiz?
Whenever me and Monica would both be at work, Georgia would babysit. If my mother didn't babysit, she wasn't absent, but she wasn't completely every single day seeing Elena, but she did see Elena quite often.
Okay. But she did not, you heard her, were you present during her testimony?
Yes, ma'am.
And is her testimony, from your knowledge, incorrect in regards to the child and the mother living with her?
Yes, ma'am. It was incorrect.
I'll pass the witness, Judge.
All right, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Philip, earlier today, you signed an affidavit of relinquishment of your parental rights. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that has been filed with the court. You have also expressed to me a preference that your stepfather, as opposed to George Ruiz, be the one that ultimately ends up with the child. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Is that still your wishes?
Yes, sir.
And would you explain to the court why you feel that way?
Well, my stepdad, he has a very stable job. He has no criminal history, no history ever of drinking or drugs. He has a stable household, stable transportation. And from my knowledge in the past of what I've seen from Georgia and Joe, it's, aggressive, filled with negativity. And I just feel like Elena would strive being with my stepfather. He's already trying to put her into a private school, and he's got her whole bedroom set up as soon as he heard that he was eligible. He's, all around a good person that has a good education and a good stable job.
What is his name?
His name is Michael.
And you are pending criminal charges in Randall County. Is it Randall County or Potter County?
In Potter County, sir.
Potter County. Do you know what the disposition is going to be of those yet?
No, sir. I'm just here on a probation violation. I'm just waiting to hear back from my criminal lawyer.
So those are still pending, and you potentially are going to likely be in prison for a while.
Yes, sir.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Wiggins. Oh, you called him. I'm sorry. Then let's see, Mr. Carey, questions.
On January the 9th, 2023, do you recall being in the back of a law enforcement vehicle on that night or day?
Excuse me, sir. Can you repeat the question?
On January the 9th of 2023, do you recall being in the back of a law enforcement vehicle when you were interviewed by workers for the department?
Yes, sir.
And you recall at that time you agreed to give Elena to Georgia?
Yes, sir.
Now, has your stepfather ever spent any time with Elena?
Yes, sir.
What time do you claim he spent?
Well, I have pictures of, we used to go over there and barbecue. I have pictures of her as a baby over there. On Christmas, Thanksgiving, she went over there and saw him. And he's now doing visits as well at his house unsupervised.
When did those visits start, do you believe?
I'm not exactly sure the date. I know they've been going on for probably at least a month and a half or 2 months now. Probably longer than that. I'm not 100% though.
Those were not things you saw.
I do have pictures of it. Yes, sir.
But you weren't there.
No, I wasn't there. I've been in Potter County
For about 244 days.
something like that.
Has the child ever spent the night with him?
Yes, Your Honor.
He's kept the child.
Sir.
He's kept the child overnight by himself.
Yes. Well, his sister is also present as well. Her name is Priscilla. She's been there with him.
So when the child was born and you worked and the mother worked, he babysat the child?
No, either my mother would or Georgia would. He works, you know,
So
around the clock at home.
question is, so the answer to my question is no, he didn't, correct?
No,
Now, do you disagree with the fact that the child spent many days of her life with Georgia babysitting her?
no, I don't disagree with that fact.
Did she do a good job taking care of him?
Not that I'm aware of.
Did
Let
she?
me clarify that. You're not aware that she took good care of your daughter? You're not aware that she did not take good care of her daughter?
I'm not aware that she took good care of my daughter.
You're saying she did not take good care of your daughter?
Exactly. Yes, sir.
Okay, sorry to interrupt. I want to be sure I understood that.
Did you stop taking her over there?
Yeah, there was a point that we had my mother begin to babysit more often because Georgia would try to get money out of us just to watch Elena.
Okay. So when she wanted to be paid for it, you didn't want to pay her for it, right?
Well, we were more than happy to pay her for it, but I mean, you know, I figured she just want to be around her granddaughter more often.
Okay. So did you stop letting her babysit at that time?
Around the time all that was going on is around the time that Monica died, so she wasn't in my care. She really stayed at my house.
Okay, I'll pass witness.
All right. Let's see. Who has not questioned him?
I have not, but I do not have any questions, Judge.
Anyone else?
Judge,
Nope.
I have a couple of follow-ups.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Tolbert, are you aware of any drug use by Miss Ruiz?
Yes, Your Honor. Or yes, ma'am. Sorry.
That's okay. And how did you know of that?
We've smoked weed together. We've drank together. The first time I ever met her was her birthday party. And we were getting drunk and drinking and smoking. And I was probably, I think I was 19 or 20 at the time.
Okay. Have you ever done drugs or done drugs with your stepdad?
No, he doesn't do anything straight and narrow.
Okay. And you indicated before when you testified for Mr. Taylor that there was some negativity or anger aggression there. Have you seen any anger aggression between Mr. Fuentes and Ms. Ruiz?
Yes, especially coming from Mr. Fuentes. He just, you know, hot-headed. He just gets angry quick. He's gotten angry with me. You know, we've had altercations of verbal, of course. And there's just a lot of aggression in the household that I've seen.
Did the parent, you indicated that you consumed marijuana while Ms. Ruiz was there and she consumed it as well. Did Monica do that as well?
Yes.
I'll pass the witness, Judge.
Anyone else have further questions?
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
That'll be my turn.
Okay, Mr. Carey, you got other questions?
Just a couple, Judge. And I may just not have been paying attention close. What charges are you in Potter County for?
I'm here on a probation violation.
And what was the original charge?
Burglary of a habitation.
Are those the only charges that have you in custody currently?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any prior felony convictions?
Not a conviction, no, sir.
Prior felony probation?
No, sir.
Prior felony arrest?
Felony arrest, yes.
Okay. And what was that for?
Aggravated assault, burglary of a habitation, and assault on a pregnant person.
I'll pass witness.
Okay. Anyone else?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
All right, then. Mr. Taylor, do you have any other witnesses?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Carey, any other witnesses?
No other witnesses, Your Honor.
Mr. Ingram, any witnesses?
No witnesses.
And Ms. Wiggins, did you have any other witnesses?
Not for this hearing.
Okay.
For this part of the hearing.
Okay. All right, then. All right, then, based upon the testimony I've heard today, I am going to grant the amended petition for leave to intervene. And let's see, let me find it. Mr. Carey, your order that you presented to me was basically said that I considered the petition in intervention. If you'd amend that to say that I considered the amended petition for leave to intervene and that it is granted.
All right, Judge.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we're back to the final hearing. Ms. Wiggins, you witnesses to call for that.
Yes, Judge, I would like to tender all the evidence that was presented in that short hearing to determine intervention, as well as obviously the hearing or the witnesses previously.
Okay. All right.
I would also like to call Alexis Venezuela.
Okay, let's get her
Thank you,
in.
Judge. Miss Venezuela, how are you currently employed?
I work for the Department of Family and Protective Services.
And were you working in that capacity on January 9th of 2023?
I was.
Excuse me. Did you arrive to an address on, excuse me, Duncan Street?
Yes.
And what were you advised at the time that you arrived at the scene?
Law enforcement was requesting an immediate assist, and so when I arrived at the scene, there was an overdose that I was told about by law enforcement, and at the time, Mr. Tolbert was under the influence.
Okay. And at that point in time, did you know that the mother had passed?
Yes.
And did you have a chance to talk to Miss Ruiz?
I did, yes.
And did she indicate anything about medication that the mother was on?
Yes, at the time she did.
What did she say?
That there was medication given to Monica for back pain, and that was gabapentin.
Okay. Did she indicate whether or not Monica had a prescription of that?
It was not prescribed, no.
Okay. And so with Miss Ruiz giving that medication to her daughter?
With a conversation I overheard, yes. And then when I spoke with her later, she did deny giving Monica that medication.
Now, in regards to placement, was the child originally placed with Miss Ruiz?
Yes.
And at that point in time, did the department attempt to mitigate reasons for removal, but unfortunately with Mr. Tolbert being intoxicated and the mother deceased, did the department have no other alternative but to remove the child at that time?
That's correct.
Now, in regards to Mr. Tolbert, after the child was removed, did you have an occasion to speak with him?
I did.
And was he forthcoming with you about his past?
He was.
And did he seem honest with everything that he had told you about his past drug history and criminal history?
Yes, he was honest and forthcoming about that.
And did you talk to him about where he was living with and who he was living with at the time?
Not that I can see in my affidavit and investigation report.
Okay. Do you remember that or do you not remember?
I do not remember, no, ma'am.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. And on January 12th, did you have another conversation with Miss Ruiz?
I did.
And what did you speak with her about?
I asked her if she had ever provided Monica with any gabapentin or muscle relaxers, and I also discussed her past drug use.
Okay. And what did she state about giving Monica drugs?
She told me that Monica asked for gabapentin and muscle relaxers, and that would have been January 8th. And she denied giving them to her. But then she did tell me that a few months ago she had given her a methocarbamol. That was 3 or 4 months before we had spoken on January 12th.
Okay. And did you talk to her about her recent Miss Ruiz's drug use?
Yes, she had denied it, and she just said that she had used marijuana back in the day. But that there wasn't a specific time frame. It was just back in the day.
Okay. And did the department request for Miss Ruiz to verify her statement of not using drugs by completing a urine analysis?
That's correct.
And did she complete that?
She did.
Judge, I'd like to offer Petitioner Exhibit 6. It is that drug screen on Miss Ruiz.
6 is admitted.
And Miss Valenzuela, yes. Was that drug screen positive for marijuana?
Yes, it was.
And was the child removed from Miss Ruiz's residence?
Yes, she was.
All right. I'll pass the witness, Judge.
Okay. Mr. Taylor?
No question, John.
Mr. Carey?
Did you ever have Ms. Ruiz take any other drug tests?
No, I did not.
Ever have any indication from any visits that she showed up under the influence of drugs?
No, I did not.
Is it, are you aware of Department of policy regarding marijuana?
Are you talking about a specific policy?
Yeah, the specific policy, the department doesn't remove from homes based on use of marijuana alone, do they? Specific,
I'm aware of that, yes.
and they're prohibited from removing for that, aren't they?
I'm aware of that unless it causes an injury to a child while they're under the influence.
All right, I'll pass with this.
Mr. Ingram.
Alexis, you were the investigator on the original case, is that correct?
That's correct.
And Mr. Carey asked you about subsequent drug testing or subsequent visits to the child. How long was your responsibility on the case last?
Typically, our investigations only last 30 to 45 days. So after the adversary hearing, the investigation closes.
So with regard to any future drug tests or actions at visits, you would have no knowledge of that since you were no longer on the case. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Pass witness.
All right. Anyone have further questions for Ms. Valenzuela?
Judge, I have one more I need to ask.
All right.
The report your report says that the mother passed away because of an overdose of fentanyl. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, pass witness.
Anyone else?
No, Young.
All right, then can Ms. Valenzuela be dismissed?
I have no objection, Judge.
Objection.
Okay, thank you, ma'am, for your testimony. I'll remove you so you can go on about your afternoon's business.
Thank you.
I do, Judge. I call Venus Mincy.
All right. Ms. Wiggins?
Thank you, Judge. Before I do that, I would like to just get some of these exhibits entered. I'd like to offer Petitioner Exhibit 1. It's an indictment for Philip Tolbert in the Potter County case 81198-D-CR for burglary of a habitation, I'm sorry. Offer Petitioner Exhibit 2. It's a judgment. In that case, he got 8 years deferred adjudication. I'd offer Petitioner Exhibit 3. It's the motion to proceed on probation. Offer Petitioner's Exhibit 4. It is a certified copy of Mr. Tolbert's service plan. And I'd offer Petitioner's Exhibit 5. It's the order for additional services for Mr. Tolbert signed on March 7th of 2020. And I would offer Petitioner's Exhibit 7. It is the denied home study on Ms. Ruiz and Mr. Fuentes. I'd offer Petitioner's Exhibit 8. It is an information against Joe Fuentes, I'm sorry, for assault causing bodily injury, family. And then I would offer Petitioner's Exhibit 9. It's a judgment against Joe Fuentes for the assault causing bodily injury for. Thank you, Judge. That's all my exhibits, and I am ready to proceed with Ms. Mincy.
Okay. Let's see. I can't remember. Ms. Mincy, did I swear you in?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Then you may proceed, Ms. Wiggins.
Thank you, Judge. Ms. Mincy, how are you currently employed?
I am a supervisor with St. Francis Ministries.
And are you a supervisor for the case with Atlanta?
Yes, ma'am.
And as part of your duties as a supervisor, is it to review home studies that are conducted in cases?
Yes, it is.
And do you make the determination whether or not the home study is accepted or denied?
I make the initial determination. My director makes the final determination.
Okay. And did you have an occasion to review a home study on a Georgia Ruiz and Joe Fuentes?
Yes.
And what determination did you make regarding the home study on whether it was approved or denied?
It was eventually denied, but we were going to look at doing a kinship safety evaluation due to the criminal history on the Joe Fuentes that was reported on the home study.
Okay, can you explain that a little bit more, please?
Yes, so we got the home study back and everything was okay except for the criminal history for Joe Fuentes. And so when we pulled criminal history, my directors directed me that we would need to do a kinship safety evaluation, meaning pull police reports and any information we could find on that criminal history because of the fact it was committed against the other person living in the home. From then we get started trying to pull police reports and get any information that we could so we can interview them and go from there.
Okay. And after you completed that, was the determination made to deny the home study?
Correct.
Did you also have any occasions to communicate with Ms. Ruiz and Mr. Fuentes?
Yes.
And how many times did you communicate with them?
I have over 15 pages of documentation, so I've communicated with both of them several times.
And during your communication with them, is one of the issues that have been brought up the use of marijuana in the house?
Correct.
And when you spoke with them, did they indicate, or with Ms. Ruiz, did they indicate whether or not she had used in the past?
Yes, and they had asked us if they could submit to drug screens to prove that they were no longer smoking.
Okay, and did they do that?
They did do that.
And did they provide you negative drug screens?
They did.
Okay. Now, in regards to one of your conversations, did something unusual happen after one of your conversations?
Yes, ma'am, it did. During one of my conversations with Joe Fuentes, I'm not positive exactly. I'd have to pull it up what the conversation was about. But once that phone call ended, Joe called me right back. I answered the phone and he was speaking to another female in the phone. During that conversation, I overheard the female ask Joe if he was going to be able to take care of Elena if they were to get her back. Joe made the statement, "Hell yeah."
I'm going to object to the testimony. It appears to be a conversation that she was not a party to, and would, I think, therefore be inadmissible.
Well, it's hearsay if it's from Joe, so that's.
Well, Judge, I would say it's an exception to hearsay. It's a statement against interest.
Overruled.
Does that mean she can answer? I'm sorry, Judge.
No, it means she can't answer.
Okay. Now, in regards to that conversation, did that bring up some concerns on whether or not you felt that the parent or the grandparents would follow the rules regarding no marijuana use after getting the child back?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, let's see. In regards to the home study, there were also conflicts with their reporting of their criminal history and the actual criminal history. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, ma'am.
And additionally, when the mother was discussing her children and talking about Monica, she indicated that her daughter did have a drug use history. Is that correct? And does that conflict with Ms. Ruiz's testimony today? Were you present during her testimony today?
Yes, ma'am.
And did that conflict with her testimony that she was not aware of her daughter having a drug history?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, also, Mr. Fuentes, and this has already been admitted, Judge, Mr. Fuentes stated he had been arrested twice. Does that correspond with the information done on his background check?
No.
Additionally, he indicated that the case of assault had been dismissed. Again, is that contrary to the information that you have regarding the assault family violence?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, in regards to the mother, she also stated that CPS had not been involved in the history. Did that conflict with one of the daughter's reports that she had actually grew up in foster care? And I'm referring to page 21, I'm sorry, of the report.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, does it concern you that there are so many contradictory statements that were disclosed on the family plan of service? I mean, home study, I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
And why does this concern the department?
They're just not being honest. They're telling us one thing, they told the home assessor another thing. That concerns us. If we put a child in the home, what could be going on in the home?
Does it also concern you that they had initially told the investigator that they were not using drugs actively and then tested positive for marijuana?
Yes, ma'am.
Does it also concern you? I'm going to go to page 23 of the home study. Does it also concern you that many of the individuals they asked to, I guess, give positive references, at least 4 of them had not visited their home?
Yes, ma'am.
Additionally, does it concern the department that Mr. Fuentes does not have his driver's license?
Yes, ma'am.
And are you aware or have been told if he drives currently?
Judge, I'm going to object to hearsay.
You rephrase it if you can, Ms. Wiggins.
Sure. Have you been told by Ms. Ruiz or have any personal knowledge of whether or not Mr. Fuentes is still driving a vehicle?
Yes.
Now, is the child currently having visitation with Mr. Tolbert's stepfather?
Yes.
And how long has he been having visitation with the child?
I'm not exact on that. I would say at least a month or two.
All right, I'll pass the witness, Judge.
All right. Mr. Taylor?
No question, John.
Mr. Carey?
The home study that you've been testifying about, is it correct that you did approve it, right? Is that my understanding of your testimony?
No, that home study was not approved.
And it was not approved with subject to a safety plan review?
Correct. When I initially got the home study,
yes,
that's when we told them we would need to do that kinship safety evaluation and look through all the issues that we're having with the home study. So it wasn't initially approved.
It was not approved subject to a safety. Excuse me, my power is having an issue here. It was not approved subject to the kinship safety plan.
Right, and the concerns that were on it, correct.
So what issues at that time were there?
So the main issues, like I previously stated, was Joe's criminal record.
So if Joe was out of the picture, other than Joe's criminal record, there was nothing that you disapproved of in the study, correct?
No, so let me say, if Joe, at the time, if it was not to Joe's criminal record, Miss Ruiz had said she would do parenting and drug classes, which I was trying really hard to work with her to do that. But then there was other concerns that arise with that.
But at the time, at that initial time, the only concern was Joe's criminal history, correct?
Judge,
Correct.
I'm going to object to asked and answered.
Overrule.
Correct.
And the criminal history then was a 60-day jail sentence for assault family violence, correct?
The criminal history that I was told that we needed to assess was, I think there was 3 different domestic assault charges out of a couple different counties, and also a terroristic threat that I had to review.
Okay. Are you aware the only evidence the department has presented today is one judgment out of Randall County for domestic violence?
Yes, sir.
And there's no other, correct?
Right.
And that's the reason the home study is disproved. That one case, correct?
Correct.
All right. Is there any, do you agree that Mrs. Ruiz had a relationship with Elena her entire life?
Judge, I'm going to object to that. She has no personal knowledge of that.
Yeah, if you don't know, Miss Mincy, you don't know.
Okay.
You don't know?
I do not know, no.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Carey.
Thank you. The home study supports that Mrs. Ruiz would be a good place to place Elena, correct?
Judge, I'm going to object to that characterization based on the fact that she's testified it has not been approved.
Yeah, I don't know how to respond to that. Miss Mincy, you can answer the question if you can. If you can't, you can't.
Yeah, I can't answer that. I'm sorry.
But Judge, I need to change the power system out that I'm on right now. Could I have just a couple of minutes to do that?
Sure.
Okay. Can you point out to me any part of the home study that recommends against Mrs. Ruiz?
The only thing I'm seeing in the actual home study assessment would show that Ms. Ruiz has a history of substance abuse that she minimizes.
Can you point out what page that is?
Page 24.
So I see where that is. Now, in the home study, all the contacts, collateral contacts were all positive. Is that correct?
If I remember correctly, yes.
The financial ability to provide financially was adequate, correct? Are you familiar with the ongoing visits that Mrs. Ruiz has had with the child?
From the testimony from Stephanie earlier, I am familiar with today.
Right. So that all appears to be very positive.
Correct.
Objection. Bolstering the previous testimony.
Overrule.
Based on that type of interaction, would it appear to be in the best interest of the child for there to be continuing contact with Ms. Ruiz?
I feel yes. Yes.
I'll pass the witness.
All right. Mr. Ingram.
No questions.
All right. Anybody have follow-ups for Ms. Mincy?
I do, Your Honor.
Okay, go ahead.
Ms. Mincy, has it been previously explained to you, Ms. Ruiz, one of her I guess, ideas to take the child was that Mr. Fuentes would move out of the home and that she would stay in the home with Elena. Is that correct?
Yes.
Does that seem like a very viable long-term plan?
No, from doing some research, she didn't have any income coming in. So all income for the household was with Joe. So yeah.
Okay, so just to clear, and it is stated in the home study, all the income is from Mr. Fuentes. She's not employed. Is that correct?
Correct.
And on page 18, they summarized their monthly expenses. Do you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
And they put $0 for groceries.
Correct.
Is that correct? And then on page 19, however, they put pet food is $60 per month. Is that right?
Right.
So there are a few little inconsistencies in statements about monthly expenses. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Also in that report, it says Mr. Fuentes doesn't have a driver's license and states he owes $200 in past surcharges. So he still doesn't have a license. Is that correct?
Correct.
Additionally, let's go to, you mentioned on page 24 that it says Ms. Ruiz has a history of substance abuse and minimized her use of drugs, but that's not the only summarize of concerns. Is that correct?
I'm going to object. That's been asked and answered, and this is a leading question.
Overruled.
There is also, she did not disclose her criminal history. Is that correct?
Correct.
It says they appear very angry with the child's father and blame him for her daughter passing away. Is that right?
Yes,
Again,
ma'am.
Judge, for leading questions.
Yeah, don't lead, Ms. Wiggins. Just, you can point her to the page and ask her about the subject matter.
Okay, thank you, Judge. On page 25, can you just read out the only concerns with Ms. Ruiz?
Sure. The ones with Ms. Ruiz and Mr. Fuentes, or only Ms. Ruiz?
Both, if they have both.
Ms. Ruiz and Mr. Fuentes appear to be very angry with the child's father and blame him for Ms. Ruiz's daughter's passing away. Ms. Ruiz was excessive regarding her previous relationships. She was reporting only having had 3 other relationships before Mr. Fuentes and not accounting for the father of one of her children. She was asked several times before she provided the information. It is also not known where the last name Ruiz is from, as she did not report a marriage to anyone named Ruiz, and her maiden last name is De Herrera. Mrs. Ruiz's citizenship could not be verified. It is not known.
I'm sorry, Ms. Mincy. What did you say couldn't be verified?
Her citizenship. Sorry about that. It is not known if Ms. Ruiz and Mr. Fuentes understand Elena was at risk of harm due to being in her parents' care when they were under the influence of drugs. They provided information that Elena and her mother were residing in their home, and it does not appear they reported any concerns with Ms. De Herrera using drugs while caring for her daughter. St. Francis Ministries may want to further assess Mrs. Ruiz and Mr. Fuentes' protective capacities. St. Francis Ministries may want to obtain a physician statement regarding Mrs. Ruiz's ability to care for a young child based on her self-reported physical and mental health. One of Mrs. Ruiz's children stated she was not raised by her mother and grew up in foster care. Another of her children said CPS was involved in his childhood, but was too young to know the circumstances. Ms. Ruiz did not disclose any FPS history.
So in regard, and I'm just going to skip down to the second to last bullet point. What does it say in that room?
Mr. Fuentes and Mrs. Ruiz denied domestic violence in their relationship. However, Mr. Ruiz said he was arrested. That should say Fuentes. Said he was arrested for assault against Mrs. Ruiz with the charges being dismissed.
Okay. Now, would you characterize that most of these concerns have to do with honesty?
Absolutely, yes.
I'll pass the witness, Judge.
All right. Anyone else have further questions for Ms. Mincy?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you. Mr. Bernal, Mr. Tolbert's stepdad, is visiting the child how often?
I believe it's once a week. Yeah.
Does the child appear to be well bonded with him as well?
I have not witnessed any visitation, but what I've been told from my worker is that bond is getting stronger.
Yeah. To any hearsay.
Sustained.
Okay. So you don't have any firsthand knowledge about any of that?
No, sir.
Did you approve that study as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And were there any questions at all about approving that study?
No, none.
No difficulties whatsoever?
None.
Okay, I'll pass the witness.
Anyone else?
No, Your Honor.
All right.
Judge, I have a few follow-up questions.
Go ahead.
On page 25 of the home study that you just read parts of for us, these were all recommendations of things that St. Francis should follow up on and do. Is that correct?
On page 25, you said?
What you just read, correct?
Okay. These are just recommendations from a home assessor, from her knowledge of assessing the home, that she wants us to be aware of.
Well, not only be aware of, St. Francis, for instance, St. Francis Ministry may want to further assess.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about things you should do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you do any of those things?
I attempted.
Well, Mrs. Ruiz's citizenship could not be verified. Did you attempt to verify that?
I believe, well, I did not personally. I requested the previous worker to get copies of her driver's license or ID.
Okay. So did you follow up with this or not?
No, I did not follow up with it. It was not a main concern for me.
So even though you went over these as potential concerns, those really weren't things you were concerned about. The thing you were concerned about was the criminal history. That's what you told us earlier. That was your main concern, correct?
Right.
All these things that you read to us at the direction of your attorney really weren't concerns, and you really didn't follow up on them, did you?
They were concerns. They were just not as big of a concern as the criminal history.
But for the criminal history, you would have approved the study. These other
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
Well, were these small concerns reasons that you disapproved the study?
They factored in.
Were they the main reason?
No.
Judge, I'm going to object to asked and answered.
Sustained.
Even though it's been sustained for appellate purposes, I'd like the answers so that I'll have that in the record.
You can answer it if you want to. He can make his record. I'm not going to. I won't put any credence to it.
What was the question again?
The main reason, again, is the criminal history. These smaller concerns and follow were of very little importance in your decision, correct?
Judge, I'm going to object. That was not the question. A repeated.
Well, he can rephrase it. Ma'am, you can answer that. You know what your main concerns were. Let's just move on with this.
Yeah, my main concern was the criminal history with these other concerns.
All right.
Behind that. So, yeah.
Are you aware of Mrs. Fuentes' income from Social Security that's not listed in this?
No, sir.
Or Mrs. Ruiz, I misstated. Mrs. Ruiz's income from Social Security?
No, sir.
I pass witness.
Anyone else?
No, Your Honor.
All right, then, Miss Wiggins, any further witnesses?
I call Shay Grant. And
Okay.
when did you become the caseworker?
I was assigned November 27th of 23.
And did you review all the notes from the previous worker?
Yes,
And since you've been assigned the case, have you visited Elena in her current placement?
I have.
And how is she doing in that current placement?
She's doing great. She's happy, she's healthy, very well bonded to the foster parents and the family that she's with.
And if something did not work out with the stepfather or any other family members, are they willing to adopt the child and have a plan long-term for her?
Yes, they are.
Now, in regards to the father, it is your understanding that he did sign a relinquishment of his rights. Is that correct?
Yes,
And you've in fact reviewed this. Is that right?
yes,
And did you sign it as well?
I did.
And are you asking that the judge terminate his rights based off just that relinquishment?
Yes,
And do you believe it would be in the child's best interest?
yes.
And why do you believe that?
Just based off Mr. Tolbert not really knowing when he'll be released or how much time he's going to do.
In addition to that, he has been incarcerated for quite an extensive period of time for this case. Is that a fair statement?
Yes,
And has that limited his ability to do his services?
yes,
And has he been open and honest with you about everything that's going on in his circumstances?
yes, he has.
And does he seem like he has been communicating with you and wants what is in the best interest of the child?
Yes,
And has he made you aware of who he would like to be placement for the child?
yes.
And who is that?
With his stepdad, Mr. Michael Bernal.
Now, has he also been told that the current placement is willing to adopt as well?
Yes.
And what were his feelings on that?
He still prefers Mr. Bernal to be placement.
Okay. Now, in regards to the placement, are you asking that it be continued and approved with the foster family?
Yes,
And are you asking that visitation be continued with the stepfather in order for possible placement with him?
yes.
I'll pass the witness, Judge.
All right, Mr. Taylor.
Just a couple, Your Honor. How are the visits going with Mr. Bernal?
They're going good. I've not been informed of any concerns.
And insofar as you know, the child appear to be bonding well with him?
Yes.
Appear to be anything negative in that regard at all?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. Carey.
Have you observed any of the visits?
I have.
How many?
Just one.
Did the child know who he was?
Well, I can't really say if she knew who he was or not. She did just fine while I was there.
How many visits have there been? Have there been 3 or 4? Or what's the number?
About 4 or 5.
And the child's been in CPS St. Francis custody since January of 23.
Yes.
Is it correct that the child's been in placement or released within CPS's St. Francis custody since January of 23?
Yes.
Is there any reason that Ms. Ruiz shouldn't continue to have contact with the child?
Not that I'm aware of.
Everything that you're aware of been very positive between Mrs. Ruiz and the child.
As far as visits, yes.
Did you have any input into whether or not she would be a good long-term placement for the child?
I was not.
That was decided by somebody above you or somebody other than you?
Yes, sir.
But from what you're aware of, is there any reason not to have the placement with her?
Well, she's been in the foster home for over a year now. And she's very well bonded to them. So I don't see why we need to move her as long as we're maintaining contact so that she at least knows, her biological family.
Okay. All right. I'll pass once.
All right, Mr. Ingram.
Shay, Mr. Tolbert testified about that his stepfather had kept Elena overnight. Has that been since she's been in the custody of the department?
No, sir.
Okay. And there is also an aunt that is also in the home that, while technically not required to supervise, she is there during the visits with the step grandfather, correct?
Yes.
The step grandfather is not a blood relative to Elena, correct?
That's correct.
And he is no longer married to the blood relative, the paternal grandmother. Is that also my understanding?
Yes, sir.
Right. So, and with regard to Ms. Ruiz's visitation, do you have any information on why, given all the concerns with Mr. Fuentes, he is allowed to be part of that visitation?
I don't.
Would you agree with me that it is not in Elena's best interest for him to be part of Ms. Ruiz's visitation?
Yes.
Pass witness.
Right. Anyone else have further questions for Ms. Grant?
I just have one clarifying question, Judge.
Okay.
Ms. Grant, since we are requesting that the father's rights be terminated based off the relinquishment, are you asking that the department be named permanent managing conservator?
Yes.
And are you asking that no other party be named a possessory conservator?
Yes.
Okay, nothing further, Judge.
Anyone else?
Judge, I just had one thing I want to clarify. Have there been any visits with since the child has come into custody at Mr. Tolbert's home? Excuse me, Mr. Tolbert's stepfather's home, Mr. Bernal?
Yes.
Okay. One or more than one?
All the visits are at his home.
Okay. But none overnight?
No.
Right. Pass witness.
Anyone else?
No, Your Honor, your rest.
All right. All right, Mr. Taylor, any other witnesses?
No, you'll also rest.
Thank you. Mr. Carey, any other witnesses?
Judge, I called Mrs. Ruiz earlier and we'd like to retender that evidence that we had as part of the intervention leave. And I think I'd like to call her back briefly.
Okay, we don't need to go over everything that was mentioned before. I'll take notice of that. But yeah, you can recall her for anything new. Sure. Ms. Ruiz, you're still under oath. So, Mr. Carey, you may proceed.
George, are you asking the judge to let you continue to be part of Elena's life?
Yes, sir.
And we don't need to go over all the things we testified about earlier. The judge says he heard those and he's going to consider those. Why would it be in her best interest for you to continue to have a relationship with her going forward?
Because we've really got a strong bond. I mean, I've watched Elena be born. I babysit her since she was a baby. We're really close.
And again, don't want to go over everything we've talked about, but can you provide, do you believe, a positive connection with her in the future if you're able to continue to have a relationship either as a possessory conservator or a managing conservator?
Absolutely.
Are you asking the judge to consider your dedication to continue to visit with her after her mother's death every time you had any opportunity to at all?
Absolutely.
Anything else you'd like to tell the judge for his consideration on that?
I would just really like to have my granddaughter. You know, she's all I have left of my daughter, and I'm all that she has left, you know.
All right. Judge, I'll pass the witness.
All right, Ms. Wiggins.
Ms. Ruiz, you understand that you've heard all the testimony here today, is that correct?
Yes.
And I won't go over all of it, but you did test positive for marijuana at the beginning of the case. Is that correct?
Yes,
And that was while you were placement of Elena.
yes,
And Mr. Fuentes has heard the report. You've told law enforcement he's assaulted you twice. Is that correct?
I don't know if he's been pushing, I mean, if that's assaulting.
Okay. He made physical contact with you in an aggressive manner.
Yes,
Okay. Now, and he was intoxicated on both occasions. Is that correct?
yes,
And Mr. Fuentes also engages in smoking marijuana with you, or did when the child was in your placement. Is that right?
we never smoked marijuana around her though, we were smoking outside.
Okay, but he did smoke marijuana with you. Is that right?
Yes,
Now, in regards to your children, one child was removed from your custody by CPS. Is that correct?
no, well, her father and I had split up because he was very abusive towards me. So I told him that I was fed up with him, that I was going to leave. He says, you leave, but my kid ain't going with you.
Okay, so you left your child in a home with someone that was physically abusing you.
They wouldn't let me take him. He would not let me take him.
Okay.
He's black and blue.
I'll pass the witness, Judge.
Okay, Mr. Taylor,
No question, John.
Mr. Ingram.
No questions.
Okay, anything else from anybody for Mr.
Nothing
Ingram?
else.
No, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. Everyone rest and close?
Rest and close.
Rest and close.
Okay, all right, Mr. Ingram, recommendations.
Yes, sir. I believe it to be in Elena's best interest that the father's parental rights be terminated based upon his affidavit of relinquishment. Further, believe it's in her best interest that the department be named as permanent managing conservator of the child and that no other parties be granted possessory conservator rights. I further believe that placement of the child should continue with the foster parents. She is extremely well bonded to that family. She is doing very well, and I would ask for an order that she not be moved without a further order of this court. I have no objection to continued visits with the step grandfather and with the maternal grandmother. I do not believe it is in Elena's best interest for the step maternal grandfather, Joe Fuentes, to be part of those visitations, and ask that his visits be stopped. Thank you.
All right. All right, based upon the evidence I've heard today, as well as the exhibits that have been admitted, I do find that it's in the best interest of the child. Parental rights of the father, Philip Ray Tolbert, be terminated. I'll terminate those rights today based solely on the affidavit of relinquishment, which is on file, as well as Texas Family Code Section 161.001, subsection B1K. As I previously stated earlier today, the Georgia Ruiz's amended petition for leave to intervene has been granted. I'll name the department permanent managing conservator, continue Elena's current placement. I will order that the visitation for Michael Bernal and for Georgia Ruiz be continued. I'll order that Joe Ruiz not attend any further visits when Miss Ruiz is visiting. And I will order that Elena not be moved without a prior court order. All right, our next review hearing will be on May 31st, 2024. That will be by Zoom like today's hearing, so parties and attorneys can go on the court's online docket a day or so in advance of May 31st to see exactly what time we'll have that hearing.